Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Run the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Your host Jeff Waldorf. So we're gonna have a good show. It's gonna be a good show. We were supposed to have Ron Placone today, but unforeseen circumstances. He is preoccupied with helping the Jimmy Dore show be the best that it's gonna be. So that's awesome. But of course, unfortunately, that does leave a little bit of a hole in our programming. So I do have some good stories for you, but what I want to do to kind of make up for it is I'm going to open up the lines today. So what I want to do is I'll encourage you guys to call in with your questions, comments. Maybe you want to, talk about a story or something that I don't have on the docket today, or whatever. So that's TYT Nation on Skype or 999-796-4975. If you want to do that throughout the show, I, of course, welcome your calls, comments, questions, etc. So there's that. I do have a lot of stuff that I want to break down for you today. I do have Donald Trump going to come for your internet. That's fun. We also have Jeff Sessions, police reform. That's disastrous. Trump taking profits from his business, even though he's actually not supposed to coordinate at all with his business. It's actually supposed to be managed by his son. But unfortunately, we have Trump breaking all the rules. Then, of course, what we have is Trump voters very upset about the wall. Wait a minute. There's a Trump voter very upset about the wall? Yes. Multiple Trump supporters. So now, let's see. Finally, we also have Mormon leader saying, "Hey, forget about feeding your kids. We'd rather take your money. We'd rather have you tithe than feed your children." Great. So that's awesome. We've got that video. So I'm gonna hate on religion a little bit. That should make someone in the audience very, very, very happy. Make some people in the audience very happy. And I, of course, aim to serve. Before I get into that, though, I do want to talk about, I guess give you a little update about one of the things that we talked about yesterday, and that is YouTube. YouTube news. Now, YouTube, as I said, they have been cracking down on, ads going to some hateful creators, a few here and there that are, what I like to call shitlords. With very, very small subscriber counts, a couple of medium-sized, decent-sized channels, having some ads show up on their videos, on their, hateful videos. Of course, the Wall Street Journal and the Times of London, they looked at that, they showed the advertisers freaked the fuck out. And they pulled all their ads. I mean, these are major advertisers pulling out. And then, of course, all these other channels, news and politics mostly, got swept up into this. Again, I reported on all that yesterday and gave my opinion, my commentary on it, and how, of course, is essentially right now, everyone's in panic mode. Everyone. It is a disaster for the YouTube news and politics community. There's some YouTubers haven't been touched at all. It's mainly all the different YouTube. I mean, you've got, Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske. You've got David Pakman out there. Young Turks talked about it, I think, last week when it first happened. I mean, everybody is freaking the fuck out. I was freaking the fuck out. I still am, because it has not improved. The situation has not improved. But thankfully, to the rescue, here comes you guys. Now, I put up the call yesterday that, hey, man, if we don't have people that are that will support the show, we're going to go under. No doubt. Because, again, almost 100% of our revenue comes from ads on YouTube. Not a good model, not very sustainable when they pull the rug out from under you like this. Which is why, of course, I had been building a Patreon. And thanks to you, I put out the call yesterday, and a lot of you answered. So what I want to do is thank you guys and give shout outs to everybody who signed up yesterday. Dina, Now I'm gonna avoid using last names at this point, because again, I don't want to get people in trouble. I don't know if you're okay with me using your last name or not. So I'm just gonna default to the safe option here, and just do first name, last initial, or you know, first name, last initial. Amanda D, Julian D, Barbara M, Camille W, Ruth J. All of you signed up yesterday when I put out the call, and I couldn't thank you more. I can't thank you enough for it. I can't thank you enough. I mean, you said we don't want to see independent progressive media get crushed by giant corporate advertisers that are working, of course, in concert with old media to try to destroy new media. You answered the call. There's not a lot of you, but God, I love each and every one of you for doing what you're doing, for helping me out, for helping out independent progressive media. Because, look, the media landscape, this might be a temporary change. Things might go back up to normal. In that case, God bless. That only helps continue to strengthen the show. And if it doesn't go back to normal, then at least we can go on not having to depend on ads for revenue as more and more people sign up. And that's the ultimate goal here. The ultimate goal is to try to get away from having to use advertisers and advertising money. The goal is to be 100% fan funded by you guys. And a lot of you have stepped up. We're now around $200 a month from patrons. And I appreciate that to no end, helping out and doing this. And look, I want to, start eventually getting around to doing some perks. So, like, and let me explain, like, because $200, it's a decent amount of money. It's a very decent amount of money. What I lost just in the past week is $1,500. Ouch. Disaster. So that's what happened. I would like to get up to that much. That would cover everything. And I would not need YouTube. I wouldn't have to rely on YouTube revenue to survive on $1,500. So that's where I want to get to on Patreon. At least if I get more, God bless, I can actually build this show even more. But the whole point right now is trying to basically survive. And so that's what we're aiming for here. So I will, and I thank you, everyone. Alexandria, thank you so much for pitching in $20. I appreciate that. I love you. I love you guys. And you guys help me out. I know a lot of you don't have a lot. I won't ask you to give if you can't. I'm not like the guy who's, tithing, right? Oh, no, you need to tithe. No, fuck that. If you cannot afford to do it, please don't. I do not want anyone to give at the expense of their own family and their own well-being. So let's not do that, okay? But if you can, and you do support progressive media, please do so, because we need it right now more than ever if this thing does not get back to normal. And I don't know if it's going to. I don't know if it's not going to. I don't know. Best case scenario, it gets back to around what it was before, with of course tighter controls on content. Now I can find ways to work around that so I can still talk about certain issues. But that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it stays the way it is, and I have to rely on you guys for more funding. And I appreciate it that you're helping out. So I again, I can't thank you enough. I hate begging for money. I hate asking for money. I hate asking for donations more than you know. But it's at this point, this has come to this, and it sucks. So, but anyway, we've got some stories. Let's actually do some news on this. I want to do a couple of quick, or one quick story, and then we'll get into some of the other stories. I kind of designed the show again to talk to discuss these things with Ron. So It might end up a little bit short on time. So what, again, I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up 999-796-4975 for calls. So to take your comments, questions, TYT Nation on Skype. So give us a call. We're pretty much open. So we'll do that. All right. Now, yesterday I did report how the fight for Obamacare might not have been over, and I might have been a little wrong on the scale of this. Now, Trump said he was in negotiations. Turns out that's actually true. He has been talking to the Freedom Caucus to try to get some deals on Obamacare. Yes, they are still trying to change this thing, some of them at least. Now, again, there are members of the Freedom Caucus that have signed on to Trump Care, and some that have not signed on to Trump Care that are still trying to be wooed. People like Mark Meadows. Now, this agreement, any agreement with the Freedom Caucus, basically would hinge on Republicans accepting changes to the healthcare bill. These moderate Republicans who are like, hey, let's not get rid of some of these key protections. For example, people with pre-existing conditions. Well, people in the Freedom Caucus are like, no, let's change that. Let's get rid of that so we can make it cheaper for healthier people to afford insurance, which of course would guarantee health insurance corporate profits. That's what's going on here. Now, again, this agreement would violate a promise from President Trump. Now, Trump said, hey, man, the American people like pre-existing conditions? You like the pre-existing conditions things in Obamacare? We're going to keep that. We're going to keep that. You know why? Because that's tremendous. We are going to keep that. So, fantastic, right? Well, the House Freedom Caucus says, well, I want to get rid of it, but if we can't get rid of it, maybe we can make a couple of changes here. For example, one of their changes would be to change so-called community ratings. Now, what's a community rating? Well, it's basically a set of regulations that compel insurers to offer plans at the same rate for sick people as they do healthy people. Now, without it, sick people would end up paying exorbitant premiums for, being sick. Now, the plus side for some people on that is that the people who are healthier would end up paying less for their insurance because sick people wouldn't be able to afford it. So you have a cancer patient who, when they drop this, their premiums go up. They can't afford cancer drugs, or they can't afford premiums plus cancer drugs or anything like that. They drop out. That lowers the price for everyone else who is healthy. Now, the whole point of insurance is that when you get sick, you use it. But changing these community ratings is some of the other things that the Republicans want to change, the Freedom Caucus wants to change, would basically say, no, insurance, that's all about when you're healthy, giving money to insurance companies, and then when you're sick, drop off, you're gone, go ahead and die. Because we don't care, we just want to lower premiums for healthy people so they can continue to pay for health insurance profits. That's what this is all about. Now, Freedom Caucus Mark Meadows said this during a talk with reporters. The fundamental idea is that marginally sick people would pay the risk associated with their coverage. Those that have premiums that would be driven up because of catastrophic illness or long-term illness, we've been dealing with that for a long time with high-risk pools. High-risk pools, generally, that's what everybody who is sick is supposed to go into under the Republican plan. Now, the problem with high-risk pools is that they're incredibly expensive. But I guess they would probably try to design something to where you would lower the cost a little bit, maybe a government subsidy, something like that, to try to lower the cost a little bit. But again, it's not very cost efficient. It's actually against what insurance is supposed to do, creating these special high-risk pools. But as so far right now, negotiations are still very, very early. They're very preliminary. So we don't know what may or may not be included in a second bill if one ever gets proposed. Again, they worked on this Trump Care proposal. They had 7 years to do it. Almost 8 years. They still hadn't figured it out by now. So maybe it's going to be another 7 or 8 years until they figure out what they're going to do with Trump Care. Who knows? But anyway, so there's that. Yeah, he is actually going. And the thing that I was wrong about is that I was like, they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to talk about this at all. Well, maybe they actually are. At least some of them do want to bring it back. Some Republicans are looking at saying, okay, we want another crack at Obamacare. We think we got it this time. Or we're in negotiations to try to get it this time. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what comes out of that. All right. So I am getting a question here from the chat. Let me read this. Charlie Youngblood asks, how do I feel about the articles discussing Bernie TV? I actually think it's a good thing. Bernie TV, let me tell you, the first time I saw Bernie TV was that last interview he had with that woman talking about voter fraud. Forgive me if I don't remember her name. I'm terrible with names. So I saw this Facebook Live. I pulled it up and I'm like, this is a good discussion. Huh, Bernie TV. Wow. I didn't know that there was such a thing called Bernie TV. That's amazing. And so the article is coming out about it. And I listened to Cenk's coverage of the, ironically, Alex Seats-Wald talking about Bernie TV. And I thought, well, you know, Alex Seats-Wald, not exactly the biggest fan of Cenk Uygur, because he wrote a pretty bad article about Cenk, calling him an opportunist. So, but to be fair, in this article, for the most part, Alex Seats-Wald was very factual, and it was a fairly good article on Bernie TV. I haven't seen any of the other articles about it, but if they're as fair as that last one was, well, then I've got no problem. And I think Bernie TV is great, and I actually think that covering Bernie TV is actually a really good idea, because you don't see a lot of mainstream outlets covering this, even though they've had millions of views, a giant Facebook Live presence. So, I mean, when something like that, for example, if a conservative outlet were to do something like Bernie TV, actually they did try. It was called Trump TV, and they went crazy over this. They went crazy over Trump TV, but when Bernie TV comes around, most of the mainstream corporate media is silent. I don't like that. That shows, oh, we only care about the Republicans, what the Republicans are doing. We're not going to care about Bernie, that crazy socialist. Why don't he just go away? Why doesn't he just go away? So that's what I think about that. Also, Pat, thank you so much. I appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for your donation, for helping out, using the super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And of course, Pat's been around for a very long time. Sometimes we disagree. Sometimes the chat disagrees, but it's all respectful communication and conversation, and that's what I love here. I love that everybody is here who has different viewpoints, but has a respectful conversation, and I love everyone who's in here who does that. So again, another reason you guys here at home that are watching, that are in the stream, that are fans of the show, and just another reason I love you guys. So thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate it. Bottom of my heart. Bottom of my heart. All right. So let's get into some more stories, huh? All right. Now, the Trump administration is moving to destroy net neutrality rules, because apparently destroying your online privacy wasn't far enough. That was, of course, something that Donald Trump had also previously signed. So again, being able to get rid of your privacy rules and using it, basically your private information, your browsing history, and allowing these ISPs to sell that to third-party advertisers so they can inundate you with ads. Again, that wasn't bad enough. Now he's actually after your net neutrality rules. Now, the Huffington Post ran an article last week where it talked about the Trump administration's new focus on basically killing net neutrality rules. Now, those rules, approved by the FCC back in 2015, aim to preserve the free and open internet and to ensure that it could not be divided into pay-to-play fast lanes for web and media companies that can afford to, and slow lanes for everyone else, including me. So since, of course, there are a lot of media outlets, operations, especially on YouTube and other smaller outlets, that can't afford fast lanes for our content. You know, if you own a website and you want to compete with Amazon or Google or whatever, and you don't have net neutrality rules, and these ISPs decide, well, we're going to throttle you unless you pay our ransom. Well, if you can't afford that ransom, your site runs slower. Your competitor's site will not run slower if they have the money to pay that, which, of course, if it's Google, Netflix, Facebook, whatever, they can afford that. Their content will be faster. So, and of course, speed is everything on the internet. If your web page takes 9 years to load, even if it's got great content on it, people ain't going to stick around. At least not new people. They're not going to come. They're not going to check out your stuff. They're not going to buy things from your homemade store. Oh, you know, they're just going to go. They're going to go to the competitor. And that's unfortunate. And that, of course, gives a giant advantage to corporations. So, again, disaster. Now, in a news conference, a recent news conference, Sean Spicer mentioned the net neutrality rules affecting telecommunications and cable services and said that the Obama administration had reclassified them as common carriers, which is true. Mr. Spicer said that President Trump had pledged to reverse this overreach. The Obama-era rules, Mr. Spicer said, were an example of bureaucrats in Washington placing restrictions on one kind of company, internet service suppliers, and picking, quote, winners and losers. No, you know who will be picking winners and losers without net neutrality rules? Your ISP, when they throttle content creators who cannot pay this online ransom. Again, this is like a toll system. You got to pay to get on the highway. You can't pay, you're going the slow lane. Sad day for you. Now, Mr. Spicer also remarked on the rollback of privacy rules before he spoke more broadly about regulations on broadband internet services. President Trump, he said, will continue to fight Washington red tape that stifles American innovation, job creation, and economic growth. No, you know it's going to stifle job creation, innovation, and economic growth? The fact that these small startups can be throttled by their ISP. Again, a lot of business happens online now. It's not so much brick and mortar. You've got more internet online-based businesses popping up. If they cannot afford for their to pay their ISP for faster lane access, while their bigger competitors can, they are at a disadvantage. They can't afford it. They're going to go out of business, or it's going to be much, much more difficult. So, again, that might actually lead to the deaths of certain small businesses. Now, of course, what I can say for 100% certainly is that Ajit Pai, well, once he became the FCC chairman, we saw this coming. We knew it was happening. We knew it was going to happen soon. And now they're starting to look at this. They're starting to target this. They're starting to say, hey, man, you know what? Let's get rid of those pesky net neutrality rules. Doesn't matter that over 1 million people signed petitions to have FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler in the Obama administration. Because I remember back in this fight, I was going against Tom Wheeler and I was saying, hey, Tom Wheeler, don't be a corporate stooge and actually go and reclassify net neutrality reclassify these carriers, these ISPs as common carriers and protect net neutrality. You know, video after video, urging people to contact Wheeler during the contact period where you could put in your comment and say, hey, protect net neutrality. I remember that fight. And for a while, it seemed like we actually won that fight. But now, under Ajit Pai, we're going to see a rollback of those net neutrality rules, which, again, is a disaster. So, and the other thing, too, that actually helped us during that first fight was the inclusion of large corporations. So maybe they'll still be on our side, the Googles, the Netflixes, and the Amazons, all the bigger companies against the telecommunication companies. We don't know. But if there's another comment period, I suggest still putting the pressure on. Because maybe, who knows, Ajit Pai is, of course, somebody who's represented these telecom companies. But maybe if there is enough pressure, we could bring it to bear against them, and they might change their tune. Maybe. As far as I know, that seems to be the only way that we could possibly stop the net neutrality rules from being absolutely eliminated. So I guess, put on your boots, and it's time to resist. It's time to let them know exactly how we feel about our net neutrality rules. All right. Remember, 989-796-4975 if you want to join the conversation with a comment, question, or whatever. We'll move on. And if you catch me in the middle of a segment, stay on the line if you decide to call in. And I will answer as soon as I'm done with the story. So, 796-4975, TYT Nation on Skype. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has just ordered the Justice Department to review reform agreements with troubled police forces. Now, troubled police forces, what does that mean? It's places like Baltimore and Ferguson, for example, but not just them, but with other departments nationwide. Now, in a 2-page memo released on Monday, Sessions said agreements reached previously between the department's Civil Rights Division and local police departments, a key legacy in the Obama administration, will now be subject to review by his 2 top deputies. Now, the memo was released not long before the department's civil rights lawyers asked a federal judge to postpone it until at least the end of June, a hearing on a sweeping police reform agreement known as a consent decree. Now, they were negotiating that with the Baltimore Police Department that was announced just days before President Trump took office. And of course, President Trump is he's very pro-police. Pro-police, ironically, union, pro-police enforcement. So, look, you heard it himself. He's the law and order candidate. Yes, I am the law and order candidate. Everybody's going to respect the police. Okay. So that's where Trump is on this. And Jeff Sessions, obviously not very far behind. Now, the Attorney General and the new leadership in the department are actively developing strategies, and I'm reading from the memo, to support the thousands of law enforcement agencies across the country that seek to prevent crime and protect the public. Justice officials said in their filing, the department is working to ensure that those initiatives effectively dovetail with robust enforcement of federal laws designed to preserve and protect civil rights. So again, this is following their very, very pro-cop, pro-police position. Well, okay, but when you say pro-police, it makes you think that there's an anti-police side. There's actually not. We're all kind of pro-police, but we're not pro-police state. We're not pro-police brutality. We're anti all of those things. So, again, everybody knows that there's a need for police officers, that there's a need for, people out there that are supposed to defend regular people. Right now, our police forces, at this point, don't really do that as much. And that's the problem. There's a lot of racism that's endemic in police forces, and there seems to be a lot of police brutality happening as well. And they seem to be more of an arm of the rich and powerful than they are people who are supposed to protect and serve us. That is the problem. We're also not pro-police militarization, which happened, of course, unfortunately, under the Obama administration. And we're also not pro-racist police practices, which happened in cities like Ferguson and Baltimore. Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump, however, well, they happen to be in favor of these things, as far as we know. Now, since 2009, the Justice Department opened 25 investigations into law enforcement agencies and has been enforcing 14 different consent decrees, along with some other agreements. Civil rights advocates fear that Sessions' memo could particularly imperil the status of these agreements that have yet to be finalized, such as a pending agreement with the Chicago Police Department. This is terrifying, according to Jonathan Smith, Executive Director of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. Now, Mr. Smith spent 5 years as the department's chief of special litigations, overseeing investigations into 23 different police departments such as the ones in New Orleans, Cleveland, and Ferguson. He said, quote, "This raises the question of whether under the current Attorney General, the Department of Justice is just going to walk away from its obligation to ensure that law enforcement across the country are following the Constitution." Now, the Baltimore Agreement, for example, reached after Freddie Gray died in April 2015 following an injury in police custody. I remember doing that story. That was not an accident. That guy, he was given a nickel ride. It's where they, of course, put you in the back of a police cruiser, or a police van in this case, without a seatbelt, and they drive over, potholes. They drive crazy. Now, it's not supposed to kill you. It's supposed to rough you up. Which is disgusting. It sounds like it's a 1920s crime novel. Or, something that corrupt police departments use. Which I guess, in the case of Baltimore, very, very true. Now, after that, of course, happened, outrage. Riots, protests, all that. Okay, and it makes sense, right? And you had calls for changes, including training officers on how to resolve conflicts without using force. Now, I'm in favor of that. There's no need to use excessive force for policing. It doesn't need to do this. You don't need to do this, okay? Now, the Justice Department had asked for 90 additional days to assess whether the agreement fits with the directives of the President and the Attorney General, according to the filing Monday evening in the U.S. District Court in the District of Maryland. U.S. District Judge James K. Brader had scheduled a public hearing for Thursday. Now, again, unfortunately, now they're not going to have to do this. Officials who negotiated this agreement had criticized this move, including Vanita Gupta, former head of the Civil Rights Division under President Barack Obama. She said that the request for a delay is alarming and signals the retreat from Justice Department's commitment to civil rights and public safety in Baltimore. And again, Baltimore Mayor Catherine E. Pugh also said that she and Police Commissioner Kevin Davis oppose this delay. Any interruption in moving forward may have the effect of eroding the trust that we are working so hard to establish. And look, this department, Baltimore was especially bad. In a report last year during the Obama administration, it said that the Baltimore police engaged in racially discriminatory policing and used excessive force because of systematic deficiencies in the department. Now, my whole take on this. These police need to get retrained. The bad cops need to go. Good cops, you got to retrain them. When every problem looks like a nail, you become a hammer. And that's essentially what we've turned policing into. Everything's all about, you got to be afraid, okay? You got to be afraid. You got to pull the trigger whenever anything happens. If they reach for their belt, you got to pull the trigger immediately. They reach for anything. If they don't follow instruction, do what, immediately escalate to force. I believe in de-escalation. I believe that police are there to do a service, right? And so what police need to be doing is remembering what they're actually there for, to protect and serve. And so when you're a cop, you agree to take certain risks, just like you do with any other job. Okay, for example, if you're a construction worker, you take the risk of falling off a high rise. I know it's a terrible analogy. It probably is not even a great analogy at all. But I think you take certain risks. When you're a police officer, you know what that job entails. You might not come home that night. But you do that to protect your fellow citizen. And unfortunately, right now, we're training the police the opposite, to take absolutely no risk with themselves. And if anything even appears remotely risky, draw your weapon and be prepared to kill. I don't like that. That is not a good system. That is an unsustainable system. And of course, when you also have racist policing, like we've seen, of course, in Ferguson and in Baltimore, well, that creates a lot of different problems. Now, again, in this report, federal investigators wrote to police in Baltimore, driven by a legacy of zero-tolerance enforcement, conducted stop searches and arrests that violated the constitutional rights of the mostly African-American community. And look, in Ferguson, there was another report that found that that the Ferguson police officer, the police department, sorry, they would actually basically target African Americans with fines and arrests and civil forfeiture in order to basically boost their own coffers. They were using that community as a piggy bank in order to get more money, to extract more from people who don't already have that much. And this has been happening all over the country. And again, you've seen things like civil asset forfeiture laws being expanded, actually hitting white families for once, which is why there's a lot more people paying attention, where, you know, it's related to obviously drug enforcement, where if you're caught, or even if you're, say your house is under suspicion that something might have happened there involving drugs, right? Somebody might have been selling drugs out of your home, or somebody using drugs in your home. They could take your house and they can sell it. They get all the money from this civil asset forfeiture. So it's basically state sanctioned theft. So this is the stuff that we're seeing. And this is the stuff that Attorney Jeff Sessions, he's looking at these police departments and saying, we're going to do a review of some of these agreements to put a stop to some of those practices. And we're going to see whether or not it fits our very pro-police agenda. That's troubling to me. I don't think that's a good thing to do at all. There are reasons that these agreements are in place in the first place. And so looking at these, going through these reviews, you can obviously see where Sessions and Donald Trump are really in favor of, who they're actually backing, and it's not us. It's not us. It's definitely police. Okay. So, there's that. All right. Remember, 989-796-4975. You want to join the conversation. A new detail in the trust agreement Donald Trump established to administer his business holdings shows that the president remains financially tied to the Trump Organization months after supposedly giving up that access to his two sons. Now, ProPublica recently reported that Trump had added a new clause to his trust agreement on February 10th. Now, what this agreement, this new clause in the agreement says is basically it allows him to withdraw funds at any time from any of his businesses, which number in more than about 400, without actually having to disclose that he's taken money from those businesses. Now, the clause says the trustee shall distribute net income or principal to Donald J. Trump at his request, and the trustees deem necessary for his maintenance, support of uninsured medical expenses, or as the trustees otherwise deem appropriate. So, look, why is this a big deal? Well, the Huffington Post explains. Before Trump took office, he promised to cede control of the entire Trump Organization to his two sons, who also pledged to keep the president in the dark about the company's day-to-day operations. Well, you know why? It's because when you're president of the United States and you own a business, well, you kind of sign legislation that could either hurt or help your business when it comes to tax rates and regulations, for example. So it's important to keep that stuff in the dark, how it's going to affect your specific business for this specific legislation. You keep that in the dark so that you can make unbiased decisions on whether or not you approve or veto certain laws that come to your desk. That's why it makes sense to avoid these conflicts of interest. Now, as it turns out, Trump not only may continue to withdraw money from his businesses, so essentially he's also getting paid from his businesses while he's president of the United States, but his son Eric also said that he plans to give his father regular financial updates about the state of his business. ProPublica notes that the revised trust agreement stipulates that trustees shall not provide any report to Donald J. Trump on the holdings and sources of incomes of the trust. Oops. So basically, what he's doing, or what Eric Trump is doing, is violating his own trust agreement. First, by taking money from it, and then, of course, having Eric do reports on how his business is doing, which you're actually not supposed to do. Well, color me not surprised. Doing something unethical in the Trump administration? No. No way. Well, here's the question that came to my mind. If he's a billionaire, why does he need to withdraw a regular salary from his business? I mean, look, you could say, hey, man, but Trump's donating his salary. Well, let's get into that. At the daily White House briefing, Sean Spicer, President's press secretary, presented a check signed by Mr. Trump for $78,332.32 to Ryan Zink, the Interior Secretary. Now, the Interior Secretary oversees the Park Service. Now, Park Service, that's where he wanted that $78,000 to go. So everybody's making a big deal. Oh my God, look at that. He donated part of his salary, his first quarter salary, to the Parks Department, to the Parks Service, man. Wow. What a patriot. He actually cares so much about parks. Well, on that. Now, as I said, Mr. Zink was thrilled at getting this check. Well, why are you thrilled? The Trump power budget that he wants to pass, it cuts $1.5 billion from the Interior Department. The Interior Department happens to oversee the Park Service. So what this is that this is the equivalent of giving a quarter to a person whose mortgage is about to be underwater. Oh, here you go. Here's some change. Keep the change, motherfucker. Seriously. So this is what's going on. And so this is why it matters. Again, this is what Donald Trump is doing. It looks good to donate that money, but of course, it doesn't hurt him at all. So it doesn't really impact him to give that $78,000 if he's just going to go and get his money from his businesses. Hey, I request to get a payout from my business empire that I'm actually not supposed to have anything to do with while I'm the president of the United States, and that I'm not even supposed to know what's going on. This, of course, is not very ethical. Is it illegal? No, not that I know of anyway. But boy, is it very, very unethical. But again, what do you expect from somebody who cheated people out of a college education? Trump University, Trump State, all this different stuff, all these different schemes in order to get money. So, what do you expect? All right. Got a couple more stories here. Let's see. Let's go into some video stuff. I got some clips for you guys today. And one is Trump supporters against the wall. Interesting. Be careful what you wish for. You might actually get it, and it might actually hurt. Now, during the campaign, of course, President Trump promised to build the giant wall between the U.S. and Mexico to, of course, try to keep out undocumented immigrants. Got to keep out the illegal aliens, man. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. Oh, some, I assume, are good people. Okay. You get the idea. Now, turns out millions of people love that idea. Lots of voters across America were like, yes, build the wall, build the wall. There was a big chants at all these different rallies that he, that he held. And people were like, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall. Okay. It turns out in South Texas, though, there's a lot of people, Trump supporters, that were like, don't build the wall. No, let's not. Because it happens to be that there are a lot of these people in South Texas that are on the land that where the wall would actually go. Now, CNN did a special report on the impact this wall between U.S. and Mexico would have on people who were living in that area in the state, of course, that went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at that clip.
Their lives were cut in half the last time the U.S. government decided it wanted to build a wall. And Ray and Deanne Luke couldn't believe it. Their family had been farming this South Texas land for nearly 100 years until the notice came the government was taking it.
I was very angry, and I just kept saying to Ray over and over again, how can they do that? How is that possible in the United States that they can do this? Put up a fence in front of our land and then keep us in here, lock us in. I didn't understand. I was floored and flabbergasted.
That was almost 10 years ago, and the Loops, like hundreds of other landowners, thought they could fight. They lost. the government paid them a settlement and took the land it needed to build this fence, cutting their farm in two.
It essentially left us no property on the U.S. side of the border wall, including my house, my residence. Everything was behind on the Mexican side of the U.S. border fence.
Unbelievably, these American citizens were locked out of their own country. Their farm ended up on the south side of the border fence, still on U.S. soil, but wedged between the fence and the border with Mexico. Their only access to the rest of the U.S., a locked gate.
Ooh, okay, so look, that's pretty awful. I mean, what kind of big government communist dictator would approve something like this? Oh, right, George W. Bush. And to be fair, a lot of Democrats voted for this wall, for this border fence that locked these people out of their land. So, look, again, you vote for this. I don't agree with this. My position on border walls, my position on eminent domain, it should be fairly clear by now. I'm not in favor of this. I'm not in favor of a border wall or a border fence, never have been, and I'm definitely not in favor of using eminent domain to force people off their land, especially to build a ridiculous fence that is, of course, easily circumvented. But, of course, that's what happened. And, look, there are a lot of people, there are hundreds of different lawsuits. Back in 2006, 2007, when they built this fence, now, look, again, a lot of those people ended up losing, and the fence got built anyway. Now, that's just a fence, though. Imagine what would happen with a wall. In fact, CNN also, again, I got to give them great credit on doing this report. They're going to show you what's going to be like with a wall. Let's take a look.
But what happened 10 years ago in mostly desolate, dry ranch land will be nothing compared to what's about to take place. President Trump's recent executive order to expand the border wall could stretch in more highly populated areas. It will bisect even more farms, golf courses, resorts, and ranches. Hundreds of miles of wall and hundreds, if not thousands of landowners will be forced to sell their property to the government. Former Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Ralph Basham says expect huge, prolonged legal battles.
Particularly in the urban areas, it's going to be very complicated. It's going to be, it's not a popular idea. And like I said, individuals are not happy when, they lose part of their property.
I don't think anybody here is just going to hand over the property.
Pat Bell is one of them.
What happens here means everything to me.
Like almost everyone CNN talked to along this border, Bell is a Trump supporter. But she does not support a wall, especially one that would essentially move her home to the Mexican side of it. She says fences and walls don't work, which is exactly why she plans to fight for her property.
So absolutely, I would go to the people that are in charge, and you hate to say I would get a lawyer, but if it come to that issue and you had to, you would.
Bell, like thousands of other property owners along this border, nervously wait the final design, placement, and eventual legal notice that the U.S. government is coming to take away their land.
All right, so look, I'm going to be a bad person and say this because it's what popped in my head. So is it a bad thing? Is building a wall and a fence now a bad thing to this person because they end up on the Mexican side? Look, it's just a thought. But anyway, look, that whole state, you voted for that. Okay, look, if you don't believe in walls, great. At least we believe in something. We have something in common. A lot of credit for that. They don't work. We know they don't work. The giant wall is not going to work. Ask the Chinese. Ask the Chinese if walls don't work. Okay? Look, you have, you got things like tunnels, you've got airplanes, you've got boats to cross some places where there are beaches where you could land. And hell, even a catapult can beat this wall. I did a story a while ago where customs officers found a drug catapult used to fling pot over the border. Hey, if you don't want drugs if you don't want these drugs to come pouring in, I got a simple solution for you, and it doesn't involve a giant wall. How about you legalize, regulate, and tax drugs? That would be so simple. I mean, a lot of people would rather go to the government-approved pot shop than some sort of shady dealer, in which you don't know what's in that marijuana. You don't know what's in that cannabis. You don't know what's in those drugs. They could be laced with something. Not only that, but look, you would also, if you legalize, regulate, and tax, you would end up crushing the cartel's main source of income and even reduce the demand for heroin. Now, studies on marijuana have shown that it actually might be very helpful in getting people off of opiate addiction. People who are addicted to opiates, painkillers, well, marijuana has been shown to reduce pain and to help wean people off of these very hard drugs and heroin even. So again, you do something about the opiate epidemic, and you also kill the cartels. And you also might actually reduce the violence of which is leading tens of thousands of people to flee from South America into Mexico and into the United States, even though right now immigration is at a net zero. And look, with all the money being spent on the drug war, Mexico might instead be able to invest in its people if they also stop their drug war, which basically they're only doing it because the United States is pressuring them politically to do it. So you would be able to invest into your people, reduce poverty, which also might reduce illegal immigration, because again, one of the major reasons that people immigrate to an area is because they don't have opportunities back at home. They're facing violence, poverty, war. Maybe if you were to do something to stop that, then they wouldn't have to leave and they wouldn't have to immigrate to another country. See, we missed a whole point. Like, these people aren't coming in from Mexico to hurt us. These people aren't coming in from Syria to harm us. Okay? These people are fleeing problems in their own homeland, and they see United States as the city, the golden city on the hill, a place where you can actually have opportunity, a place where you can actually go to escape these other issues and create a new life and to have opportunity for your families. And a lot of immigrants have done so, and a lot of immigrants have came in and they have made something of themselves, of something of their families. You might be familiar with a certain son of a certain immigrant. That would be Steve Jobs. You might be using like an iPhone or something. Well, that's because of an immigrant. Steve Jobs' dad was an immigrant who came over from, I believe it might have been Syria, if I'm not mistaken. Although I might be wrong on that. But they came there, or they came from there to escape war, poverty. So, come on. As for the drug war, look, U.S. drug policy does have a lot to do with immigration from Mexico and other South American countries. So maybe instead of using eminent domain to steal American land to build your giant stupid wall, maybe we could actually do something else. We could start with changing our drug policy, legalizing, regulating, and taxing marijuana and other drugs. Start treating it as if it's a disease and not a personal problem or not a character flaw, and start investing in our own in our own people, and stop forcing other governments to comply with our ridiculous drug wars. Drug policy. Change that. They'll have more money to invest in their own people. I can almost guarantee that you would lower the amount of immigration. So, there's that. All right, anyway. One more story here. And it's about religion. I haven't done a religion story in a while. Now, in some certain religions, tithing still seems to be a thing. I don't know why, but whatever. Look, if you want to give your money over to the church, that's fine. But the question here is, would you do it at the expense of feeding your children? Well, one Mormon leader says, yes, absolutely. Tithe instead of feeding your kids. And he's got a personal story that he wants to share of his father doing exactly that. Let's take a look.
When I was young, I worked in my father's factory during vacation. The first question my father always asked after I received my salary was, "What are you going to do with your money?" I knew the answer and responded, pay my tithing and save for my mission. After working with him for about 8 years and constantly answering his same question, my father figured he had taught me about paying my tithing. What he didn't realize was that I had learned this important principle in just one weekend. Let me tell you how I learned that principle. After some events related to a civil war in Central America, my father's business went bankrupt. He went from about 200 full-time employees to fewer than 5 sewing operators who worked as needed in the garage of our home. One day, during those difficult times, I heard my parents discussing whether they should pay tithing or buy food for the children. On Sunday, I followed my father to see what he was going to do. After our church meetings, I saw him take an envelope and put his tithing in it. That was only part of the lesson. The question that remained for me was what we were going to eat. Early Monday morning, some people knocked on our door. When I opened it, they asked for my father. I called for him, and when he arrived, the visitors told him about an urgent sewing order they needed as quickly as possible. They told him that the order was so urgent that they will pay for it in advance. That day, I learned the principles of paying tithing and the blessings that follow.
Wow, what a heartbreaking story. Now, some people look at that and go, inspirational. See, he paid the tithe, and then God repaid him with sewing orders. Fantastic. What a wonderful story. Well, I don't agree. What I got from that story is, screw feeding your children, you got to pay your tithe. Feed the church, man, not your kids. Well, now, wait a minute. Now, look, this guy, he was General Conference Elder Valerie V. Cordone. And look, again, story, a little bit heartbreaking when you consider that the Mormon Church earns about $7 billion a year just from people that are tithing. So, wait, if you were making billions of dollars off the backs of the poor, I don't consider that very godly. But then again, I am a godless heathen atheist. So, there's that. Now, if you do follow the Bible, if you do follow religion, well, Jesus said in Luke 6:20-21, blessed are you who are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Right? So, look, blessed the poor. Well, then why would the blessed poor be required to give even more to feed a church that happens to, of course, take in so much money? Jesus didn't follow it up by charging people 10%. Hey, you know, those loaves and fishes, man, money's got to come from somewhere. Give it up. No. You know what I would call that? I'd call that a ripoff. Just saying. Besides, what does God need with your money? Why does God need a starship? Obligatory Star Trek reference. I apologize. But look, I know I might get a lot of comment. Hey, Jeff, no, you don't understand. The church, it does charity. So that's why it needs all this tithing money to do charity. Well, look, yes, some of that money does go to charity. Also, some of that money goes to lobbying politicians. So you can't really say, you know, it all goes to good causes. In fact, a lot of these churches will actually go and fund anti-LGBT legislation. So there is that. But look, yes, the church does do positive things. They do some charity. However, why doesn't God just do the charity then? Why does it fall upon us to do it? Why do we need to pay them at all? If God can do it, if God's all powerful. Look, I'm just asking. And maybe that's an unfair question, but it's a question nonetheless. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't tithe if you really believe. Look, if you want to, look, in my opinion, toss your money away to the church, hey, that's fine. And again, I'm sure some churches use that money strictly for charity. And in that case, God bless, literally. But here's my problem with this whole story. You don't ask for tithes to be from people who are broke. Okay, that's my problem. See, if you're a wealthy person and you're godly and religious and you want to tithe away, man. Have at it. But if you're poor, the church should help you. You shouldn't be forced to help the church. And right now, the Mormon church, if you want to be a part of it, requires that everyone tithe 10% of their income. Whether or not you can afford this. So that's a problem. And another problem I have is right now, there's too many religious people in organizations that happen to be in it for the money. For example, Pat Robertson, great example. Guy loves to claim that he can cure people through the television, right? And of course he asks for your money. Hey, I need this money. All these different televangelists. You got Joel Osteen, right? He's another guy that's out for your money. And look, there are a lot of people out there, unfortunately, who believe in these people, who believe in this stuff. And I feel bad for them because, look, if you're sick, and I saw this thing on Pat Robertson, man, where, this person's like, oh, I watch your show all the time. I've got MS. It's terrible. I've donated to your show. I'm on a fixed income. And God's like, Pat Robertson's like, well, God is going to heal you one of these days. But you got to get right, and you got to get sending more money, and you got to exorcise the demons. And then you will be healed from your MS. It's snake oil, man. You're not going to get healed. God, if there is a God, doesn't care about your 10%. He's freaking God. God doesn't need money. You need money, unfortunately, to survive. For God's sakes, literally, take care of your kids. And if you really want to help the church and you're poor, you can always volunteer. Volunteer your time. And if that's not good enough for your church, then maybe you need to go and find a new church. All right. So there you go. That's all I got for the show today. So that is an hour. Wow. All right. No calls. Sad. Disaster. Sad. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for watching right here. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Again, thank you so much to Pat and Alexandria for using the super chat and donating to our cause. Thanks to all the new patrons that have signed up to support the show through this very difficult time. I appreciate it more than anything, and I thank you more than you guys can know. So I'm very, very humbled by this. So I appreciate everything you're doing to help the show. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Tomorrow, hopefully we'll have Ron back tomorrow, right here, 3 p.m. Eastern, TYT Nation. Again, thank you all. Tune in tomorrow. Have an awesome day. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.